Good day to everyone joining us and welcome to today's X Talks webinar. Today's talk is titled Achieving Transparency in Food Product Quality Inspections. My name is Nima and I'll be your X Talks host for today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 30 minutes. This presentation includes a Q&A session with our speaker. This webinar is designed to be interactive, and webinars work best when you're involved. So please feel free to submit questions and comments for our speakers throughout the presentation using the questions chat box, and we'll try to attend to your questions during the Q&A session. This chat box is located in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. If you require any assistance, please contact me at any time by sending a message using this chat panel. At this time, all participants are in listen-only mode. Please note that this event will be recorded and made available for online streaming. You'll be receiving a link to the recording of this webinar via email in a few business days following this event. You can also access all recordings you've registered for under your My Profile section of xtalks.com. At this point, I'd like to thank iTradeNetwork, who developed the content for this presentation. iTradeNetwork Incorporated is the leading global provider of on-demand supply chain management and intelligence solutions to the food industry. Built upon vast industry expertise, a comprehensive data foundation, and the industry's most extensive trading partner network, iTrade's collaborative solutions allow distributors, manufacturers, operators, and retailers of all sizes to reduce supply chain costs, increase revenue, improve compliance, and strengthen trading partner relationships. Now, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today's event. Trey Ruello is a Senior Product Manager responsible for iTradeNetwork's suite of quality inspection and traceability solutions. He has spent his career working with technology companies. Prior to joining iTrade, Trey worked in corporate development and strategy for a large public technology company, and before that was an M&A investment banker for technology and tech-enabled service companies. Trey's goal for 2018 is to complete the refresh of iTrade's industry-leading traceability platform, and to continue to improve Fresh, iTradeNetwork's revolutionary new quality inspection tool. So now, without further ado, I'd like to hand the presentation over to our presenter. Trey, you may begin the presentation whenever you're ready.
Great. Thank you, Nima. It appears you can see my screen now. Is that correct, bro? Perfect. So thank you, everyone, for joining this morning. We look forward to spending the next half hour or so with you. And so what we'll do is, look at the quality inspections across a number of different industries, and then begin to hone in on the produce industry, which is our kind of focus example for this webinar. So to begin, there we go. Quality inspections are prevalent across many industries today. Most industries involved in manufacturing, assembly, or growing maintain quality standards and inspections to evaluate those standards. Everything from automobiles and construction to food and beverage and clothing, and in particular, generally fairly heavy industry regulation around medical devices and pharmaceutical, which prompts inspections there as well. Inspections come in many different forms. Pre-production inspections, inspecting essentially the raw materials that come in before assembly or manufacturing, are fairly prevalent across most heavy industry and even clothing industries. During production inspections, so inspections that happen during assembly or manufacturing, are also fairly prevalent. A lot of those are more based on sampling a finished product and identifying problems during the processing of the product to make corrective action and ensure that anything that's finally leaving an assembly line is in good condition. They also have final inspections. Final inspections, such as in the food and beverage industry, are generally performed on a sampling basis and are ensuring that quality is up to par for whoever the end consumer is, and that everything that reaches there is in good shape. And so food and beverage, clothing, automotive, all tend to have inspections of that sort. Why are quality inspections important? There are a number of reasons which we'll focus on to ensure that output or the products that are being manufactured really meet safety and quality standards expected by both the manufacturer, the company, and the consumer. Certain more specific reasons why quality inspections are important. First, they minimize risk. No one wants defective product leaving their facility, and the risk of harm is fairly significant, especially in things such as pharmaceuticals, food and beverage, and the automobiles. From a consumer standpoint, it should be all companies' goals to protect the consumer. A defective product can cause serious harm to a consumer, especially if it's on the pharmaceutical side or the food and beverage side. Industry compliance. So, we've got one survey that was performed here asking, do regulations play a role in your quality inspection process? As you can see, well over a majority of industries have some regulations that are driving their quality inspection process. And a significant number of those actually go beyond what regulatory and compliance is requiring to have their own standards that are generally higher. With respect to reducing costs, defects are costly, particularly if not caught early in the process. And associated costs from defects may include paying to bring back all the product to the manufacturing facility, re-engineering that product and reusing some of those raw materials, lost product along the supply chain, and at worst, recalls, which tend to be the most costly form in the industry. And the fifth thing is really maintaining a positive company reputation. So no company wants to be known for not delivering quality product, and ensuring throughout the manufacturing process and at the point of departure from the facility that the product is not defective and is in good shape and meets quality standards is paramount within most industries. There are really two types of inspections. The first is really the quality assurance and facility condition inspection. So those generally are performed more on the production side. So they're going to be generally manufacturing assembly in those facilities, primarily focused on product quality and locating defects and checking for certain conditions within the facility itself. So that may be cleanliness, contamination, what have you. And they also tend to be checklist oriented. It's were those certain steps completed, and are we meeting all the requirements within that facility? The second type of real inspection, and one that we'll focus on later in this talk, is really the quality and freshness and condition inspection. So those can be checklist or inspection based, so more of applying a sample to inspection standards, and generally based on the seller standards, or they can be more checklist based, depending on the industry. And so, these tend to be focused more upon condition upon shipment or arrival. Did the good really arrive with the appropriate shelf time, or did the good arrive in usable and saleable form? And so that may be, depending on what the industry is. In electronics, it may be, did it arrive just not broken? In the food industry, did it arrive with a long enough shelf life for it to reach the consumer and be at their home for a reasonable amount of time before being consumed? Or it may be, did the product arrive not bruised, or it's still in fairly physical appearance in good shape? One example of a more inline manufacturing inspection was a recent article about one of the Coca-Cola bottlers, one of the largest ones in the world, and what they've been able to do from a process standpoint. Now, Coca-Cola bottling lines are fairly sophisticated and fairly automated, and so they've actually been able to automate certain steps within their process. But as you can see, as we've laid out here, there are a handful of steps that go through that are both checking a cleanliness standpoint, such as the first one that's checking bottles to make sure there's no damage or foreign matter in them, and then from a quality standpoint, so just checking consistency of fill in each bottle and that the bottle is closed. Other ways that they check along their process is they're looking for the appropriate levels of CO2. So that would be a defect if they're not meeting that, because the beverage may not be carbonated to certain specifications, and then from a consumer standpoint, it could harm the reputation, or some consumer may just think that's how it always tastes and choose not to buy it. But as you can see, certain industries have very particular automated inspection processes that their product go through, and some tend to be a little looser and more driven by just making sure that the product is leaving the facility in decent shape. And so within food inspections, we talked a little bit about beverage inspections, but within food, there are three kind of major categories: meat, seafood, and produce. Meat inspections tend to be fairly specific and are driven by both regulation and by industry groups at large that have kind of come together to form what regulations around what needs to be inspected and what shape and quality of product needs to reach the consumer in. But meat inspections and seafood inspections are two of the ones that actually really have steps within each part of the supply chain that they must fulfill. Certain things like HACCP end up getting used in some of the seafood and meat supply chains to make sure that that product is arriving in shape that is not going to be harmful at all to the consumer. Seafood in particular, there are a lot of regulations and quality inspections around what temperature that product arrives in. And so that's where those focus. Within produce, the real focus is on freshness and product quality, some around temperature and storage, which is going to be also primarily during shipping, and then shipping conditions. And so most of those inspections occur pre-shipment or upon receiving a distribution center, say for a distributor or food service or a retailer. Now, inspections for meat and seafood, as we talked about, actually tend to occur both at those points, but actually throughout the supply chain as well. And a lot of that information gets passed on. And that's actually a big focus in the seafood industry now, is better transparency into that data throughout the entire supply chain. However, now let's focus a little deeper in on the produce inspections. And so really within the produce industry today, there are two different types of inspections that are happening here. So the first is going to be really the retailer quality inspection. So when a retailer is receiving produce at their distribution center, they're going to inspect every load that comes in. It's a fairly manual process. As of now, we as iTrade have worked with a number of retailers over the last 20 years. And in speaking to them, it still tends to be a fairly manual process. They're fairly heavily reliant on their trained inspectors. So there are inspectors who've worked at a lot of these retailers for decades and just have this ingrained knowledge. But if they don't have that ingrained knowledge, that they tend to, all retailers have inspection guidelines they use to actually inspect each type of produce. And so there are certain specifications that need to be known by all of those trained inspectors. And then it's generally not actual beyond rejecting a product on the retailer side. A lot of what's done today is it's based on really a pass-fail scale. And if the product it passes, there's no real inspection report filled out, and it makes it through. If a product needs to be rejected, there's going to be a rejection report filled out, logged, and then sent back to the vendor. From the vendor side, the supplier side, quality inspections tend to be more straightforward and simple. There's a level of grading for each product that most suppliers will go through to determine who that product is going to go to. And they're just making sure that it's up to their standards. And depending on who the vendor is, they may be a grower or they may be really a consolidator and shipper. And so those processes may vary a little bit depending on what they're receiving or how they're set up. But for the most part, it's really just grading and making sure that it's up to snuff for the type of product they send out and have their brand on. There's no real data captured on this part or really insights beyond the memory of inspectors and recording that rejected product. And when I say that, inspectors may be receiving that product from a field or a ranch, and they may notice over time that they've been rejecting a lot of product from this certain grower, but there's really no data capture that's going to lead to any of those insights within the grower shipper level. So why are produce inspections important? From a food safety standpoint, produce inspections are paramount. No one in this produce supply chain wants to have any issues related to food safety. And quality inspections are one way to ensure that doesn't happen. Transparency, as we mentioned earlier, is becoming more and more important in the supply chain. And produce inspections are one way to make sure that everyone throughout the supply chain understands at a certain point within the supply chain how that product was faring, where the quality standards were, and really how much freshness and shelf life was left on that product. It's also, produce inspections can help combat food waste. In conjunction with transparency, if a supplier knows that a certain buyer, retailer, or distributor has certain standards, they're not going to send that borderline product and risk it getting shipped back. With having transparency within those standards and what standards distributors or retailers are inspecting to, they can help better understand what product they can ship out and what product they can't. Also, produce inspections are important for consumer preferences and demand. Retailers want to ensure the product they receive is in a form acceptable to their end consumer, and they are going to rigorously inspect that to make sure that they're not going to have product that ends up sitting on their shelves not getting sold. In addition, quality produce is really a demand driver for grocery stores. There have been multiple studies that say that within grocery retailers, what pulls a lot of customers in is actually the produce and the freshness of the produce and the quality of the produce section. And that's going to have a lot of pull-through revenue on other products within those grocery stores. And so having quality produce is of paramount importance to most retailers. And in addition, controlling cost. Accepting bad product or product that may not end up getting sold is going to cost the retailer money. And in addition, sending product that's going to get rejected from a retailer is going to cost the supplier money. In addition, we just briefly talked about food waste in the produce industry, and while a lot of us know that a significant amount of that waste happens on the consumer end, we're trying to minimize that waste within the supply chain and the distribution and retail level. And so, clarity within this process can help reduce food waste at that level. Suppliers, as we mentioned, better knowing how the inspections perform lead them to shipping only product that they think is going to pass, and that's not to say that things can't happen within the transportation part of the supply chain, but suppliers who can more efficiently allocate that product and know retailer A is going to have these standards, B these standards, and C these standards. Let's make sure we're shipping them standards that comply to that, or product that complies to the standards. Can reduce time on rejections and reduce time on dispositions where shelf life can shrink dramatically. So how can inspections be improved given today's challenges? Certain issues such as different inspectors with different levels of experience, different DCs with historically different standards, which causes a significant amount of confusion on the supplier side sometimes because they know product was accepted at one DC but may end up getting rejected from another. Big physical inspection guidelines are grading from memory. I actually was speaking to a retailer the other day that told me they had a 400-plus page inspection guideline manual and that their inspectors needed to know it. That's 400 pages with a lot of specific detail on sampling and tolerance levels is a pretty hefty book and a lot to memorize. And so, figuring out ways to kind of build those standards into the inspection process is something that can help mitigate that issue. There are a ton of manual processes that happen within the inspection process. What we've looked at is trying to help retailers leverage a platform that automates these formerly manual processes. There are things that happen on the inspection floor at a loading dock, such as calculations. Someone's taking sample metrics and writing them out by hand and performing calculations. They may then need to compare that to the tolerances, determine whether or not that's going to pass or fail. And then, at the end of an inspection, if it is a fail, there's going to be a fairly detailed write-up that has to happen to explain to the supplier and to the buyer why that product is failing. And as I mentioned, it's just time-consuming to reject that product. Often, after all that data is done, the pass-fail is determined. There are other forms that need to be filled out. There's duplicate entry. And there needs to be a way to better empower inspectors to reject that product from the dock without having to do a lot of paperwork. And just quickly, speaking of time spent in inspections, we looked at a study recently where 30% of the inspections were actual inspection time, and 70% was actually repetitive administrative work. Things like figuring out scheduling, data capture, then looking at the data and performing the calculations to figure whether or not it passes. There's a lot of time spent taking those samples, taking photos, sending those photos to the right place so that they can be assembled into the report, and then just a lot of administrative work in general. So that brings us to iTradeFresh, and this is iTrade's newest product. And what we've talked about is, we've seen a lot of these issues in the produce supply chain, and we wanted to put together a platform to help our customers, essentially tackle these problems in an efficient and reportable way that provided not only the processes that they do now and help them speed those up, but actually provide additional insights and functionality within that. And so what does iTradeFresh do? First, it standardizes. It standardizes inspections across facilities, across inspectors, across seasons. It standardizes reporting and rejection notifications. It guides inspectors through each and every commodity using specifications that are stored and managed within the platform. So taking that 400-page inspection guide and actually essentially inputting it into the platform so that inspections can be determined based on those specifications. It records these inspection results, including all metrics and photos for both passing and failing inspections for analytics. It automates the generation and metric pass-fail calculations, and actually automates the rejection notifications to buyers, vendors, and whoever else needs to be informed. It reports. It looks back at prior inspections to help diagnose and identify issues that may not have been apparent before this level of data capture. And it also allows reporting and analyzing and scoring and ranking vendors to optimize the supply chain. And what it does is, it improves vendor trust through consistent and transparent feedback. And as we mentioned, transparency is a growing trend in this industry, and I think we all want to make sure that we are more transparent and able to demonstrate these insights and help others in the supply chain understand why certain actions are taking place. So iTradeFresh, primarily, the largest module we have is the inbound inspection module. And so inbound inspections, the POs are actually automatically loaded from an integration with our OMS platform and pre-populate inspections for inspectors. We actually are allowed to define custom specifications by category or down to individual products. So as we mentioned before, that's taking that could be 400+ page inspection manual and essentially moving it into the platform so that when these inspections are pre-populated and these samples are taken, the platform automatically tells you whether or not you're exceeding tolerance thresholds. It also allows you to manage loads in order to inspect trailers and to monitor daily inspection progress via a dashboard. Other features we've built into this platform include temperature integration, so you can bring in temp tail data into these reports and have it automatically populate. Lot tracking for samples, so you can compare lots when sampling, and you can take pictures through the platform and have those automatically included in the inspection report. We also allow for field inspections within here. So there are two different forms of field inspections. The first being allowing your inspectors that are in the field to inspect against POs before the product even leaves your supplier's loading dock. So essentially pre-qualifying that product for receiving, or automatically notifying those vendors of issues before a product is shipped, so that you won't have to go through rejection and have that product have to get sent back to the vendor. Additionally, we allow for dispatch, so we allow field inspectors to respond to dispatch notifications from buyers to find the best product or vendor or lot available for, it could be broccoli or strawberries or what have you, that's out in their region. And you're allowed to assign growing regions to field inspectors to optimize these dispatches. And then we allow for analytics and reporting, as we mentioned. So since we're capturing all of this data, all the inspection data, both passing and failing, we allow our customers to compare products and to compare receiving warehouses and inspectors to locate discrepancies or differences in their inspection practices, or see if maybe there's some trends that may actually point to a bigger issue within the supply chain, and then also see details of how and why products are rejected down to the inspection level. We allow for ranking and scoring and comparing your vendors, and we allow you to compare time periods to look either across products or across distribution centers to get insight into if there's some product quality trends that are occurring. And now we're going to turn it back over to Nima for our Q&A session. Nima, I'll let you take the wheel here.
Well, thank you very much for your insightful presentation. Now I would like to invite our audience members to continue sending in their questions or comments using the questions window for the Q&A portion of this webinar. I've already received a few questions, so we'll start with those. Okay, so our first question here is, what platforms is iTradeFresh available on?
That's a great question. And so, iTrade in the past, having had some products that were restricted to very narrow platforms, we took a more technology agnostic approach to iTradeFresh. So our program is actually available on either typical web, so any laptop or PC, and also iOS and Android. So most devices out there, you're able to run iTradeFresh from either an office, which is where the buyers may be viewing some of these reports that come in, or from the distribution center floor, which is where all the inspections are going to be taking place. We recommend tablets for this, but fairly broad on the technology platform capability.
Well, that sounds like it's very accessible. Our next question here is, how difficult is iTradeFresh to implement? How long does implementation take, and what is the learning curve?
Oh, that's a great question as well. So iTradeFresh is actually not difficult to implement. If you're an existing customer of iTrade in our order management system, then we actually can provide the direct integration already to receive all of your purchase orders. If not, that's an easy discussion we can have. But training time is very quick. We've designed the platform to be as user intuitive as we can, and to be as configurable as we can, so that any customer onboarding this product can actually configure the inspection process to be more akin to what they've been doing in the past. It won't be as manual, but some of the workflows we can still incorporate that way. And we've had customers up and running in less than 60 days at this point, from purchase date to fully trained on their sales staff. And so it's a fairly quick process to get customers up and running. And as for the learning curve, I do think we've spoken to a lot of inspectors so far, and all our customers that are using the platform now, and they've all said it was easier than they thought it would be, and that a quick couple hours of training is all they really needed.
Thank you for that answer.
Great.
Awesome. And our next question here is, what segments of the fresh supply chain is iTradeFresh available for?
So right now, iTradeFresh is available on the retail and distributor side of the supply chain for produce. And we actually are looking at and currently evaluating the grower shipper side. And so if anyone on the call would like to discuss more about that, please feel free to send us an email afterwards, and we'd like to have a little more discussion with you about that.
Thank you for that answer. Our next question here is iTradeFresh an a la carte program, or is it all in?
So all the modules we've talked about today are all included in the platform, and so that's the inbound inspections, the field and dispatch inspections, and then the analytics portions. So that's all together. It's as you phrased it, all in, not a la carte.
Well, thank you very much for those answers. We've reached the end of the question and answer portion for this webinar. If your question wasn't attended to during the Q&A section, the team from iTradeNetwork will do their best to follow up with you after the webinar. You can also reach out to our speaker by using the email address on your screen right now. Thank you everyone for participating in today's conference. You will be receiving a follow-up email from Xtalks with access to the recorded archive for this event. A survey window will be popping up on your screen, and your participation is appreciated as it will help us to improve our webinars. I just sent you a link in the chat panel which allows you to share this webinar with all your colleagues on LinkedIn. So please do so when you have the time. Now please join us in thanking our speaker, Trey Ruello, by sending a quick message through the chat panel. We hope you found this conference informative. Have a great day, everyone.